stepmom falsely accused me of assault to block my inheritance at 21. Dad believed her and cut me off. 7 years later, he learned the truth. It all started on my 21st birthday, a day that was supposed to be a milestone, a celebration of entering adulthood. Instead, it became the day my life imploded. My stepmom, Claire, a woman who'd always had a smile that never quite reached her eyes, accused me of something so heinous, so unthinkable, that it still makes my stomach churn to even type it out. She told my dad I had assaulted her. Assaulted her. The word itself felt like a physical blow. I was at a friend's place, a small gathering, when the call came. Dad's voice, usually so warm and reassuring, was cold, brittle. He told me not to come home. He said Claire was distraught, that he couldn't believe I would do such a thing. My protests, my shock, my desperate pleas of innocence, they all hit a brick wall. He'd already made up his mind. Claire's story, apparently, was that I'd come home unexpectedly, drunk and aggressive, and when she confronted me, I can't even finish the sentence. It was a lie, a complete fabrication from start to finish. I hadn't even been home. The real kicker? My inheritance. My grandparents, Dad's parents, had set up a trust fund for me, due to be released when I turned 21. It wasn't a king's ransom, but it was enough to help me finish college without debt, maybe even a down payment on a small place someday. Claire, I later pieced together, had significant gambling debts, something Dad was blissfully unaware of. She saw my inheritance as her lifeline, and I, apparently, was an obstacle to be removed. The days that followed were a blur of pain and disbelief. I was locked out of my childhood home, my calls went unanswered, my messages unread. Friends' parents let me crash on their couches, their pitying looks almost as hard to bear as Dad's outright rejection. I tried everything. I gathered statements from my friends who were with me that night, even got security footage from the restaurant we were at. But Dad, blinded by Claire's crocodile tears and her carefully constructed web of lies, refused to even look at it. He said I was manipulative, just like my mother, he spat out during one brief, agonizing phone call before blocking my number. That cut deeper than anything. My mom had passed away when I was young, he was all I had. And just like that, he was gone. The inheritance, of course, never came to me. I found out later that Claire had convinced Dad to use it to help with her medical bills and therapy from the trauma I'd inflicted. The irony was a bitter pill to swallow. The next 7 years were hard. I dropped out of college for a while, working dead-end jobs to survive, the weight of the accusation and Dad's abandonment a constant shadow. Every birthday was a reminder of what I'd lost. But slowly, painfully, I started to rebuild. I went back to school part-time, fueled by a quiet determination to prove, if only to myself, that I wasn't the monster they'd painted me to be. I got my degree, started a small online business, and even found love with a wonderful man, Alex, who believed in me without reservation. Then, out of the blue, 7 years almost to the day of that fateful birthday, I received an email. The sender? My dad. My heart hammered against my ribs as I clicked it open. It was short, almost clinical. We need to talk. I know the truth. The truth. After all this time. A wave of emotions washed over me, anger, confusion, and a sliver of something I hadn't dared to feel in years, hope. I agreed to meet him, choosing a neutral public place, a small cafe. Alex came with me, a silent pillar of support. Dad looked older, grayer, the lines on his face etched deeper than I remembered. Claire wasn't with him. He started talking, his voice thick with an emotion I couldn't quite place. It turned out, Claire's lies had finally caught up with her. Her gambling addiction had spiraled further out of control. She'd started stealing from him, forging his signature on checks. When he confronted her, demanding to know where all their money was going, the whole sordid story unraveled. In a desperate attempt to explain years of missing funds, she confessed everything, including the false accusation against me. She'd needed that inheritance money, and I was in her way. Simple as that. But here's where the first real twist came, the one I never saw coming. Dad didn't just apologize. He told me Claire hadn't just confessed to him. She'd also, in a moment of either drunken remorse or calculated self-preservation, confessed to her sister, Martha, years ago, shortly after it happened. Martha, it turned out, had always disliked me, saw me as a rival for Dad's affection even before Claire came along. She'd kept Claire's secret all those years, actively enabling the lie, even feeding Dad little tidbits to reinforce his belief in my guilt. My own aunt, by marriage at least, had conspired to keep me estranged from my father. The betrayal felt fresh, a new wound layered on top of the old. Dad, to his credit, looked ashamed. He told me he'd cut all ties with Martha. He then slid a thick envelope across the table. It wasn't just an apology, it was a hefty sum of money, far more than the original inheritance. He'd sold a property he owned, he explained, to try and make amends, to give me the start he'd robbed me of. He also told me something else, something that made my blood run cold. Claire, in her desperation, hadn't just been gambling. She'd gotten involved with some very dangerous people, loan sharks who weren't as forgiving as a heartbroken father. A few weeks before Dad contacted me, Claire had disappeared. Vanished without a trace. The police were involved, but there were no leads. Dad suspected the worst. It was a chilling thought, a dark cloud hanging over what should have been a moment of reconciliation. We talked for hours that day. There were tears, recriminations, but also, slowly, the first fragile tendrils of understanding. He didn't ask for forgiveness, not right away. He just asked for a chance to slowly rebuild what had been shattered. I didn't know what to say, what to feel. The money, the apology, it was all so much, so late. But looking at him, seeing the genuine remorse in his eyes, the toll these years had taken on him, a part of me, the part that had yearned for its father, wanted to believe. The story doesn't end there, though. A few months later, as Dad and I were tentatively navigating our new reality, I received another shock. A letter, forwarded from an old address, postmarked from a small, obscure town I'd never heard of. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a photograph. The letter was from Claire. She wasn't missing, not in the way Dad feared. She'd run. She wrote that she knew the loan sharks were closing in, that she couldn't face Dad after her confession. She also wrote something that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. She claimed Martha hadn't just passively kept her secret. Martha had been the one to suggest the assault accusation in the first place. She'd coached Claire on what to say, how to act, how to manipulate Dad. Martha had wanted me out of the picture permanently, hoping Claire would eventually leave Dad, and she, Martha, could then swoop in. The photograph was of Martha, meeting with one of the loan sharks Claire had described, looking far too comfortable. It was a setup, a long con, and I, and then Claire, had been pawns in Martha's twisted game. Claire, in her letter, said she was sending this as her own form of penance, a way to truly expose the one who had orchestrated so much of our family's pain. She didn't ask for forgiveness, only that I believe her. Whether Claire was telling the whole truth or just trying to deflect blame, I wasn't sure. But the photograph was undeniable. We went to the police with it. The investigation into Martha is ongoing, a complex web of deceit and financial manipulation. Dad, meanwhile, is a changed man. The ordeal has aged him, but it has also stripped away a certain naivety, a blindness he once had. Our relationship is still a work in progress, a delicate dance of rebuilding trust. There are good days and bad days. The money he gave me sits in an account, untouched. I'm not sure what I'll do with it. It feels tainted, a symbol of so much pain. But perhaps, one day, it can be a symbol of a new beginning, not just for me, but for what's left of our fractured family. The biggest surprise of all? I found out I was pregnant a few weeks after Claire's letter arrived. Alex and I are going to have a baby. It feels like after all the darkness, a tiny, persistent light is finally breaking through. It's a new chapter, one I get to write on my own terms, with the love and support I always deserved. And maybe, just maybe, my child will know their grandfather, a man who made a terrible mistake, but who is, at last, trying to find his way back.